Much everyone for Thank you so much everyone for attending our second community briefing. We had one in late June, and this is our last community briefing for 2024-2025 AAPI Community Development Fund, also known as AAPI CDF. Again, welcome into the space. We're going to be starting, but if you're just joining us, please, if you're able to, drop your name, your pronouns, and the organization that you are with into the chat, just so we get a good record of who is joining us today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start. So one of the things we wanted to do is just to introduce you to the CACF Grants and Contracts team and my colleagues who are here with us on the call today. My name is Ambrosia Kawia. I go by she, they pronouns, and I'm the Director of Grants and Contracts at CACF. I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to my colleague, Kit.
Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Kit Lau, she, her. I am the Senior Contracts Coordinator, and I'll pass it to Francis.
Thank you very much, Kit, and a wonderful good afternoon to you folks. My name is Francis, pronouns he, him, and I'm the Grants Coordinator at CACF. Happy to see you all. I'll turn it back to Ambrosia, who will introduce the rest of our Grants and Contracts team.
Thanks, Francis. So we did want to give you a quick overview of the folks working here at CACF to support all of our subcontractors across our various funds. Kit and Francis are here today and will be the primary contacts for AAPI CDF. And we also work with Camilla Song, who is the Grants and Contracts Associate for the team and supports our entire Grants and Contracts team. A quick note about CACF Grants and Contracts. What we do is we manage all of the government funding that CACF receives, both coming in and going out. We have several different portfolios, and I'm going to move ahead a little bit just so folks are familiar with the other folks that support our different funding streams. So we have Fiona and Simon, who are essentially the Kit and Francis of our equity funding. And then we also have Juan, who works on the back end for vouchering and invoicing and getting folks paid. So he's often a quite popular person with all of our subcontractors, because if you hear from one, you're probably getting some money. And just a little bit of information about how the Grants and Contracts team at CACF works. We really center relationship building. So as folks apply and as if you're selected to be part of AAPI CDF for 2024-2025, one thing that we really want to do and really care to do is make sure that all of you feel supported throughout this process, even through the application process. So we're wanting to make sure that folks can get the information in myriad different ways. Again, we're offering some community briefings, but next week, Kit and Francis have office hours, and we've actually extended those office hours to 7:30 and 8:30 on some days, just to make sure that folks have as much time as possible to engage with our team and answer any questions. I know the application is due on the 22nd, so our eyes will be on our emails to make sure anybody having issues or anybody needing additional support with submitting their application are able to get that assistance next week. And I'm going to go ahead and move forward into our presentation. So a lot of you may be familiar with CACF, but a lot of you also may not be familiar with CACF and may be hearing about us for the first time here. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to just give just a very brief overview about our organization. So CACF is the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families. And our mission is that we're the nation's only Pan-Asian children and families advocacy organization, bringing together community-based organizations as well as youth and community allies to fight for equity for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And the way we do that is we collect and share information that counters the model minority myth and sheds light on community needs. We train and activate AAPI youth, community organizations, community members as social justice leaders. We build a strong and sustainable coalition and mobilize that coalition of partners and allies to fight for systems and policy change towards equity. If you're interested in learning more about CACF, please definitely reach out to us. We have a number of different programs you can get involved with, and many different policy campaigns that are often working across the state. So if you have any questions or want to learn more, please reach out to us and we're happy to connect with you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to my colleague, Kit, who will just give us a rundown of what's going to happen in this meeting.
Thanks, Ambrosia. Here is the agenda for our briefing today. We will talk about the background of the AAPI Community Development Fund, also the eligibility, organizational vetting, the funding focus areas, as well as the online application, the project evaluation criteria, and the budget, and give you a sense of the application timeline and provide contact information to you. And we will answer all questions at the end of the briefing. At the end of the briefing, we will ask you to unmute yourselves or drop your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to all your questions. I will pass it to Francis.
Thank you very much, Kit, and good afternoon again, folks. So I know we have new faces in the in today's briefing. Some may be familiar with AAPI CDF, but others may not. So devoting a little bit of time to just explaining the brief background. So for those who are just learning more about AAPI CDF, and it's also noted in our RFA, but CACF launched the New York State AAPI Community Development Fund through the 2021-2022 New York State AAPI equity budget with support from New York State legislators. Since the inception, we've implemented two grant cycles of AAPI CDF and have been able to award altogether a total of $670,000 to 37 awardees. And these awardees, these are community-based organizations all across New York State. Now, for the 2024-2025 AAPI CDF, we were allocated $350,000 as part of the New York State AAPI equity budget. And again, that $350K is devoted specifically to this fund. The remaining portion is directly allocated to organizations, which is known as the Equity Budget Coalition. And the goal for CDF, it's first to engage with organizations not currently funded through a direct EBC allocation. We also support organizations with less experience with government contracting, mainly new organizations and also smaller organizations. And more importantly, CDF, it's to support organizations outside of the New York City area. And with this particular fund, AAPI CDF will support holistic approaches towards addressing anti-Asian hate and bias, and addressing mental health needs and increasing the safety of AAPI New Yorkers, and also providing critical social and health programs and services that promote the safety and well-being of communities. So I'll turn it over to my colleague Kit, who will talk more about the organizational eligibility.
Thanks, Francis. Here is the list of the eligibility requirements. You must have tax-exempt status as a 501c3 for at least 2 years and be an incorporated nonprofit under New York State. You must also be currently registered with the Charities Bureau of New York State. Your organization must be based in New York and serve primarily New York State residents and have experience working with and outreaching to AAPI populations, and be committed to equal employment opportunities and delivering cultural competent services. If you are a religious entity, your services will be required to open to all communities. If your organization will have a fiscal sponsor, you are still eligible to apply, but your fiscal sponsor must meet all the eligibility criteria here as well. Next slide, please. If your organization is being allocated a direct award through the 23-24 AAPI equity budget, you will not be eligible to apply for this grant. If you're not sure whether you are receiving the 23-24 equity budget, please let us know. We'll check on that for you. If your organization has received past funding subcontracted by CACF, you are still eligible to apply for this grant, even if you've received the AAPI Community Fund during the 22-23 cycle or the 23-24 cycle. And if you had received equity budget funding from the 22-23 cycle, and you are not receiving the current cycle of 23-24 equity budget, you can apply for this grant. Organizational vetting. CACF will conduct an internal vetting for all applicants. This is a list of the databases and agencies that we'll be checking during the vetting process. We will be checking if your organization can be found on the IRS database and the New York State Department of State Corporations database to make sure that you are incorporated in New York State, and that your organization will also appear on the New York State Charities Bureau. The next two, which is the New York State Department of Labor and the Workers' Compensation Board, we will be specifically looking at the debarment list. If your organization does show up on the debarment list, we can have some further conversation with you. And for the project budget, which is part of the Google application form that you are required to fill out for the application, we will check all costs on the budget and make sure that your costs are allowable and that they are aligned with your proposed project. I'll pass it to Francis to talk more about project areas.
Thank you very much, Kit. So in terms of project areas and what CDF will fund, so there are 8 specific project areas that through CDF. They are community-based mental health and well-being, direct services and support, cultivation of safety and community, racial literacy programming, healing-focused and community empowerment programs, gender-based violence prevention and intervention, cultural arts programming, and life-affirming multi-social services and other holistic supports. So you may have seen this already in the RFA, but just to clearly reiterate, applicants may choose more than one project area. That is perfectly fine, but you do not need to choose all 8 project areas. What matters most is the quality of your project proposal in your application, and making sure that the project proposal, aligns closely with the specific areas that you intend to focus on. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Kit, who'll talk more about the budget.
Sure. For your requested funding amount, it can be no more than $30,000, and it cannot exceed 1/3 of your annual operating budget. So keep this in mind as you are completing the budget template, which is an Excel file that is part of the Google application form. If you have any questions, please let us know. The AAPI Community Development Fund is a reimbursement-based award. And what this means is that organizations are expected to pay for their project costs upfront before receiving reimbursement. And awardees will also be expected to spend down their full award amount. I'll pass it to Francis.
Thank you very much, Kit. So for the application, it's a 2-part online application. First, there is a organizational background and info, and then the second part is the project description and budget. You may have, through our recent communications, you've probably already seen the application link that is already live, and that you're able to go ahead and start with. If folks need a copy of the application questions, we're happy to share that with you offline. Next slide, please. So in terms of how exactly your project proposal will be evaluated, of course, what's very important is making sure that your proposal, it's focused, it's well-defined, and that it clearly aligns with one or more of the project areas identified. More importantly, it holistically addresses hate and bias. um, the reasoning for your project proposal, that it's compelling, and of course it's related to the potential impact to the AAPI community. Also very important is making sure that that the applicant themselves, that they're demonstrating linguistic and cultural capacity, also having a track record of providing culturally competent and language accessible services, along with an understanding of cultural and linguistic needs for the population served. Now, just to stress the final 3 points on this slide, it's also very important that your project proposal has a clear and realistic achievable timeline. Given that the CDF award, it's a very time sensitive, very time, a tight a tight grant timeline. It's important to make sure that what you're proposing, that you're able to accomplish it within the grant timeline period. Also important is making sure that the project budget that you're also submitting in your application, making sure that there's a strong relation to your proposed project. And with that, making sure that there are reasonable project costs that reflect on what you're proposing to do for your project. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Kit, who will talk more about the actual project timeline.
Thank you, Francis. Here's the timeline for the AAPI CDF grant. The project timeframe will be 7 months from September 1st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025. The RFA, which stands for Request for Applications, was released last month on June 17th. You should have all received the Google application form. If you need help with that, please let us know. We already had our first community briefing on June 25th, and we're conducting the second one right now. Francis and I will have virtual office hours for folks who may have additional questions or need some assistance about filling out the applications next week. And we will provide you our hours so you can make appointments with us. The deadline is July 22nd, and this is a hard deadline. We can't give any extensions. So please submit your applications by July 22nd. The decisions to applicants, whether you were awarded or not, you will be notified by August 23rd. Again, the project start date will be September 1st, and the completion date is next year on March 31st, 2025. And I will pass it to Francis.
Thank you very much, Kit. And just to close off on our presentation, so please reach out to us with any questions, any concerns. I know it's 11 days until the application is due, so I know this is a very tight and busy time for all of us, but our contact information is listed here. And also, as you may have seen in the chat, our scheduling appointment links for our virtual office hours next week are available. So again, please reach out to us with any questions, any concerns, any troubleshooting matters. We're happy to help. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ambrosia.
All right, thanks everybody. Thank you, Kit and Francis, for that presentation. We're done with our official, I guess, presentation programming. We did want to leave a lot of room for questions in case anything came up or folks want to talk through any additional information. I did see some in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and start with those questions. So Bhavna asked, I am assuming you determined the organizational budget from the I-990. That's a great question. We actually do not determine the organizational budget from your 990. In the AAPI CDF application, you're requested to submit an organizational budget, and that's where we determine the organizational budget from. So whatever you submit to us is your org budget, and we request the most recent org budget. That's where we'll determine the org budget from. Let me know if that was clear. If any,
is that I'm sorry, this is Bhavna Ambrosio.
Hi.
In the application budget template that you sent out, I
Mhm.
don't recall seeing a place where you were asking for the organizational budget.
Yes, good follow-up. So within the application, there's two things that you upload. You upload your organizational budget, and that can be whatever organizational budget you have on hand. If it's board approved, that'd be great. It's just the organizational budget for your current operating year. And then we do ask you to upload a program budget, and I'm pretty sure that's what you're referring to. That is a template that we circulated, and that's what you'll put whatever amount you're applying for. Again, you can apply up to 30K, and it can't be more than 1/3 of your organizational budget, and that number will take from whatever you submit to us.
Okay, just another follow-up question and then I don't think I have any more. You said that the project timeline was September 1 to March 31st of next year. So that's a firm timeline, so you will not fund or reimburse any expenses that are incurred before September 1 for any kind of
Yes.
programming?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, we cannot. That is a firm timeline. So we can cover any costs September 1 and after through March 31st. So
Okay.
I think something really good to take into consideration when you're thinking through your budget and thinking through what work you're wanting to claim, just making sure they're within that and your costs can reflect that as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Bhavna, for those questions. I'm moving on to Emily's question in the chat. Is it possible to share this PowerPoint information through email? Yes, we'll be sending up a follow-up email after this. We can share this PowerPoint presentation, and we'll also share the recordings from this community briefing. Moving on, a question from Sally. Thanks so much for the information. Does this funding require a match? This funding does not require a match, so you do not need to provide that at all to us. Any other questions from folks here in the room? You can feel free to unmute yourself, or you can feel free to drop it in the chat. Another question from Bhavna. Do you have an evaluation rubric that you can share? We do not have an evaluation rubric that we can share, unfortunately. I think for evaluation, you can use what we refer folks to is using the evaluation criteria that we shared today. It's also outlined in the RFA, but we do not have a rubric that we share with folks. I see one question in the chat and one hand, so I'm going to do the question in the chat. So organizational budget for 23 or 2024? That's a good question. We're asking for your current budget. So for whatever fiscal year you're in, we just ask that you share your current budget. So for most folks, I think it's 2024. It can be 2025, depending on what fiscal year you use, but the current operating year you have, the current budget you have for your organization. I see Wei. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, hi. Just want to follow up what you just said. So our organization goes with the fiscal year, meaning we just finished our last fiscal year, 2023 to 2024. So the budget I should present, is it the budget for the next year or the year just passed?
It's a great question. Yes, I know a lot of people follow the July through June. So I would say if you have your 24-25 budget, you can share that. If you don't, 23-24 is fine.
Okay, right. Okay. And then another question is, did this grant interfere with other grants? Just want to double check that, such as the NYSCA grant?
The only grant that it does overlap with is the 23-24 AAPI equity. So if you're receiving that, you can't receive this, but any other grant you receive that is not that, that's fine.
Thank you very much.
So I believe that the equity budget is funding almost all the organizations that were part of the coalition for both the years. They're not admitting any new organizations. So I thought I noticed on one of your slides that some of the organizations who were funded in the 22-23 year do qualify for the CDF funding. Do you have a percentage breakdown of what that percentage would look like that you anticipate might go to the EBC funded programs? Because the EBC funded organizations primarily are New York City and Long Island, you know, the 5 boroughs, that area. Very little of that funding ever went outside of New York City or to any of the other counties upstate. So my concern is that this pot of money is, as it is, so small that you know, just for equity's sake, how much of that small pot of money is going to be available to other organizations applying from the rest of the state?
Thanks, Bhavna, for that question. And I see your hand, Dr. George, so we'll get to you right after this. But thanks for sharing that. I heard 2 questions in there, so I think I'm gonna talk about the 22. Sorry about that. The 2022-2023 funded organizations. So if you got equity funding in 22-2023, you'll only be eligible if you're not receiving it for next year. So I don't actually think anybody was cut from 22-23. I think between those 2 years, and I'm not terribly plugged into EBC, so I can cross-reference this with Felicia, who leads all of our EBC work on behalf of CACF. But I don't believe anybody was cut from 22-23 and into 23-24. I think folks were just added. So I don't actually think there is too much overlap from that. But we did want to flag the reason why we included the 2022-2023 equity allocation in our slide is because if folks were not included in the 23-24 EBC allocations, which is what this pot comes from, then you would actually be eligible for this fund. So we just wanted to have like a really broad swath of anybody who could be eligible for this. And your other question was about how much of this money will go to upstate orgs. So I think we mentioned in the presentation as well that the way that we're pivoting this cycle is that we do want it to target upstate orgs. And again, I can't give you a specific percentage at this present moment because applications the allocation will really be based on whose applications we receive. But we are really targeting upstate and outside of New York City organizations with this. Our aim for the breakdown for this cycle of CDF is for 75% of it at minimum to go to upstate organizations. So again, that will be based on the different applications we receive just because it's an RFA. So there is an application panel and there is determination based on who's on that panel. But ideally, we're hoping that this funding will go mainly to upstate orgs because it is a state pot. And you're correct in that there's a lot of funding for city organizations. Dr. George, and then I see your question, Sally, or I see a number of questions in the chat. So we'll pivot to the chat after that. So go ahead, Dr. George.
Okay, I have 3 small questions. So according to what I understand from your talk is that budget could be anything that it could be either 23-24 or it could be 24 January to December 2024. Am I correct on that?
Yes, so for your organizational budget, it can just be whatever fiscal year you use, just the current operating fiscal year, the budget you're utilizing right now.
Got it. So if it's 2024, even though we are not till in August, September, the anticipated budget can be included.
Ask
Am I
that
correct on
question
that?
one more time.
So say if I'm taking January 2024 to December 2024, now that we are only in July, can we include the anticipated budget for the coming months like September, October, November, December?
Yeah,
In
you definitely can. So this is your organizational budget. So we're looking for your annual organizational budget.
Okay.
So it should include all of your costs for a year.
Okay.
Whatever that year is, however you determine what your organization's fiscal year is, just for an entire year.
Great, thank you. My second question is about the New York State Charities Bureau. If you're not registered, did I hear before that you would help us to get registered?
Yes, we can absolutely offer you support in that. So you can reach out to Francis and Kit, and we'll help you navigate that process if you need it.
Okay, great. My third and last question. So of the 8 subtopics that we are supposed to pick, if we pick the life affirming multi-social services and other holistic supports, there are some subtopics on that. You don't have to hit each one. Can you just pick like healthcare navigation, immigrant programming, senior services? Can you just pick a few points of that and you don't have to pick every
Yes.
point?
Yes. So just for folks who are unfamiliar, what Dr. George is referring to is in the full RFA, the project areas that we had outlined in the slides right now, they have pretty robust definitions associated with them. So the life affirming multi-social services has a number of sub-bullets, many of which Dr. George just mentioned. So the answer to your question is, if you do choose life affirming multi-social services as your project area, you do not need to address everything. You just address what you're actually doing. Those were there just so folks understand what could be possible. But you absolutely do not need to address every single sub-bullet within multi-social services.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, Sam, I see your hand, but I'm going to pivot to the chat really quick. Pauline asks, is this funding only for a new program that will take place from September or March, or can it be used for existing programming that will take place during this time? Good question. It can be used for existing programming that will take place during this time. So that's completely fine. If it is new programming that's going to take place from September to March, that's also fine. Some of the things, just for context, that we funded in past CDFs is a specific event because we acknowledge it's a really short timeline. So some folks will apply with like a specific event in mind that takes place over one day. That's also fine. So this is pretty flexible, just depending on what you're wanting to do. And if you have any additional questions, please drop it in the chat or raise your hand as well. Sally asks, are New York City organizations eligible for this opportunity? Absolutely. New York City organizations are eligible for this opportunity. All right, another one from Bal. Sorry if I deeply apologize if I mispronounced your name. Please correct me if I did.
Oh, no, you're okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Our India Heritage Mission primary objective is educational, to create awareness in the Rochester community of the art, culture, traditions, diversity, and technological advances of India, and to highlight the accomplishments of the Indo-American community of Rochester. Would this come under culture and arts programming? Great question. Yes, I think it totally is applicable to cultural and arts programming, but I think we have another one, community empowerment programming. It could also be applicable to that depending on like the specific things you're doing. So absolutely, we encourage folks to take a look at the project areas and select all that are applicable to your project. So yes to your question, but also some more. Yeah, go ahead.
The India Heritage Museum so far has been around for almost like 3.5 years, but all these times during the year, close to 5 to 6 weeks, we hold exhibitions. For example, exhibition from the state, they have their own thing in the state. The India is divided into different states with the different languages. Also, the last exhibition was the plant-based food and the yoga. Before that, we had an exhibition from people from Kannada, which is part of India's state, and they had their own things about the culture, the food, the entertainment, and everything. But for this, we actually invite the donations for this one exhibition to take place. So we don't have a budget as such, yeah. So if we were to plan another exhibition, can that be a category to apply?
Yeah, it definitely can be a category to apply. And again, I think just based on the brief description here, other focus areas may also be applicable. But if you're able to, can you reach out to us, Kit, myself, and Francis afterward, just by email, and we
Sure.
can set up a time to talk to make
Absolutely.
sure that you're selecting to learn more, and then make sure that you're selecting the correct
Okay.
focus areas for the project you're
Okay.
thinking of.
Okay. In the meantime, I'm just going to put our web address in the chat, so when you get a chance later on. Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Or thank you.
And another thing I wanted to uplift, sort of related to this question, is if you take a look at the RFA, Francis or Kit, if you're able to put the RFA into the chat, there's a lot deeper descriptions about what these project funding focus areas are that can help folks as you navigate and think through what you're going to apply for, where it might fit. But of course, if you want thought partnership on that, please definitely reach out to us, and we're happy to provide that. All right, I'm switching over to hands. So I see Sam, you're up.
Hi, good afternoon. I am from Empowerment of American Asians. So my question is specifically about the 2-year in operation criteria for the eligibility requirement. So we've been doing community work 4 years now, but we did not get our exempt status until October 22. So we're just a little short in terms of that timeline. Would that be a strict no, or is there any exception for organizations like us?
We may have flexibility around that. Can you reach out to the contracts team to talk a little bit further, just to learn more about your organization and the work you're doing prior to your 501c3 designation?
Sure. Absolutely. And who would be the contact person?
You can reach out to Kit, Francis, and myself. And thank you, Francis, for dropping our info in that chat.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sangini.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm from Federation of Indigenous Women of Nepal in America, founder member of the founder chairperson. So my question is that organization background and the information, what do you need to put this background, especially you need like organization objective and goal also?
Yes. Like the mission of the organization, are you talking about for the overall organization, or are you talking about the project, or am I missing your question completely?
Yeah, I want to know that this one is you guys is like a organization background and information. It means like our organization background and information.
Yep, that means your organizational background and mission.
Okay.
So if your organization has like, we just want to learn more essentially, what you're doing, what your mission is, and where you're coming from.
Oh, okay. And then how about that project around staff? I saw a lot of New York organization, they are community-based organization, and then they are working themselves, and then they're funding themselves. This one is, so maybe they don't have like a special, it's actually staff to run the organization. Do you need that to run this project special that different staff who has experience?
Yeah, no, of course not. We don't, like we had mentioned before, this funding is really there to support smaller and newer organizations. That's our hope for this. So you don't have to have dedicated staff within your organization to apply. It can be volunteer run, and we've supported those kind of organizations in the organizations before. So we're happy to support those again.
Okay.
But we can talk a little bit more if you want to. just reach out to us via email, and we can set up a time to talk and learn more about how your organization is set up and how you might apply for this funding.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you so much for helping.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? I'm assuming Sam and Sangini, your hands are still up from prior, but if you do have a question, please jump in.
And that was a legacy hand. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to come off mute. Happy to address anything that's coming up for folks after this presentation. Okay, so I feel I'm getting the sense that I'm going to stop sharing. So I'm getting the sense that there's no more questions. So I think we're going to go ahead and end our presentation here. But Francis, Kit, and I are going to stay on in case you have other questions or want to chat with us about anything. But thanks, folks, so much for attending. We're really excited about this next cycle. I guess big takeaway: make sure you're getting your application in by Monday, July 22nd, which is not next week, the week after that. Kit and Francis are available for office hours next week. Just please reach out to them. We're happy to support you in any way that we can.
I have one last question, Ambrosia. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
Question. Do the organizations have to be registered with, I know it's not called New York State Grants Gateway anymore, but the grants portal, the New York State Grants portal, before the application is submitted?
You do not need to be registered with the New York State Grants Gateway or the new portal SFS at all.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Yeah, so I think we're going to release you. Thank you so much for coming. We're really excited to see your applications. We're really excited to learn more about your organizations and hopefully work together soon. Bye all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.